Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Organization for Rare Disorders, Rare Disease Cures Accelerator Data and Analytics Platform, RDCA-DAP. We'll call it short for DAP. We have a great program with two of NORD's Rare Registry community leaders sharing their experience with participating in the DAP. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our partners, the Critical Path Institute and the FDA. I'm Sue Rossov, Senior Program Manager of Research at NORD. And before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to take a moment to remind you of NORD's Code of Conduct for this and all our events. Respect is critical as we work together to serve our rare disease community. As always, we want our programs to be safe spaces for all to participate. The full Code of Conduct is available on this page. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today for today's session, Dr. Teresa Strong, Director of Research at the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, FPWR, and Mark Yale, Advocacy and Research Coordinator at the International Pemphigus and Pemphigoid Foundation. Teresa and Mark, we're so pleased to have you share your experience, insights, and lessons learned as you participate in the DAP with our community. So Teresa Strong, Dr. Teresa Strong, received a BS from Rutgers University and a PhD in medical genetics from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. After postdoctoral studies with Dr. Francis Collins at the University of Michigan, she joined the UAB faculty, leading a research lab focused on gene therapy for cancer and directing UAB's vector production facility. Teresa is one of the founding members of FPWR and has directed FPWR's grant program since its inception. In 2016, she transitioned to a full-time position as Director of Research Programs at FPWR, and she remains an adjunct professor at the Department of Genetics at UAB. She and her husband, Jim, have 4 children, including a son with PWS. Mark Yale was diagnosed in 2007 with cicatricial, I knew I was going to get that. Cicatricial pemphigoid, and cicatricial means that it results in scarring. It's a rare autoimmune blistering skin disease. And like others with a rare condition, he experienced delays in diagnosis and difficulty finding a knowledgeable physician. Eventually, Mark lost the vision in his left eye from the disease. This inspired him to help others with the disease. And in 2008, he joined the International Pemphigus and Pemphigoid Foundation as a peer health coach. He worked with people to improve their quality of life and encouraged them to become self-advocates. In 2009, he helped develop the Pemphigus and Pemphigoid Comprehensive Disease Profile, giving experts insight into the patient perspective. In 2016, Mark became the executive director of the IPPF, and he recently became the advocacy and research coordinator for the organization so that he can focus on research and advocate for all of those affected by pemphigus and pemphigoid. He's a member of the American Academy of Dermatology Drug Transparency Task Force and sits on the executive board of directors for the International Alliance for Dermatological Patient Organizations as their treasurer. Mark also sits on the board of directors for Haystack Project. And so Mark currently resides in Ventura, California with his wife of 30 years. Thank you both so much for being here. We can't wait to hear your experience. And with that, I will give a little bit of an overview about the RDCA-DAP. So everyone typically wants to know what DAP is. So before I even dive into that, just to let you know that the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator Data and Analytics platform is actually one of the 4 federal grants that NORD was awarded. And so the primary researcher on this, the primary awardee, is the Critical Path Institute, and NORD is the primary research partner. And so NORD's role here is to function as one of the key data input sources for DAP. This project is meant to run for 5 years initially, and hopes that it will continue on and be really, really successful, and we can renew this grant. And then also the FDA is the second collaborator and really the funder for this project. So many of you may have seen this image quite a bit, the schematic, and I did want to just talk a little bit through it. I know it looks really scary, but the big thing to take away from this is the fact that On your left are all of the different data input sources, and you'll see here registry data falls within that. And then all of these data input sources will be inputted into this vault. The data will be curated, cleaned, and then through a whole bunch of mathematical equations and algorithms, the idea here is to make that data available to researchers who are interested in looking at either a particular disease state or for cross-disease purposes. And the data is de-identified, so your data will remain safe, and it is also stored in a very secure cloud. So the other thing I wanted to just quickly mention here is that the platform is really meant to promote the sharing of patient-level data and to encourage the standardization of new data collection. So this results in a much fuller understanding of a rare condition. And so this tool can be used to do a lot of research and to drive innovation and to aid those looking for novel treatments. So we know pretty much everyone in the rare space is looking for a treatment or a cure for their condition. So just breaking things down a little bit more here, very quick and easy steps to the entire process for DAP. There is that pre-collection and planning, and I'm sure that Mark and Teresa are going to talk a little bit about their process in joining DAP. And then there is that collection of data, which is already happening through their patient registries, contribution of that data into DAP, exploring that data and standardizing it. Mark and Teresa will also speak a little bit about that, sharing the data out, and then optimizing processes. So in a nutshell, that really is how DAP functions for the community. And our goal today is to just talk to you as other community members about the process of becoming a partner in DAP and contributing data. So I also wanted to share a couple of resources with you. If you have further questions about DAP, there is a dedicated page on rarediseases.org. The links are here. There's an FAQ document, and there's also information where you can reach out to the Critical Path Institute for any additional information that they may have. And then our direct email contact is research-programs@rarediseases.org. And so now it is my pleasure to turn things over to Teresa, and she'll be talking about the FPWR's role in RDCA-DAP.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sue. It's a great pleasure to be here and talk to you about our experience to date. We are at early stage, but have worked through some of the questions that maybe some of you are considering. So as Sue mentioned, I'm Director of Research Programs at the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research. I am also mom to a young man with PWS. And I'll just share just a little bit about Prader-Willi Syndrome. It is a complex neurodevelopmental and metabolic disorder, and it's caused by a loss of a set of genes on chromosome 15. It occurs spontaneously, so usually there's only one member in the family who has it, in about 1 in 15,000 births, and affects males and females and all ethnicities pretty equally. So like many rare disease syndromes, there's a lot going on in our rare disorder. There's multiple clinical issues, there's endocrine disruptions, there's orthopedic issues like scoliosis, GI problems, there's hypothalamic dysfunction, so some temperature dysregulation. But if you've heard of PWS, you probably have heard of it because it has this unique appetite issue where individuals, babies with PWS, are born with very little interest in eating and they have a hard time feeding. But sometime during childhood, kids start developing an excessive appetite called hyperphagia. And if they're not strictly controlled, then they will become obese. We also have mild to moderate intellectual disability and a challenging behavioral profile and a high risk of mental illness as kids become adults. So again, a lot going on, a lot of features that we're interested in trying to learn more about and treat. And in thinking about the RDCA-DAP and, how we can learn more about our syndrome, I think it's important to think about, what features are shared across disorders and what might be more unique to PWS. So we have a lot of things that are obviously going to be shared across disorders, like intellectual disabilities, clinical features like scoliosis, increased risk of seizures, which is, very common across neurodevelopmental disorders. And then there are other features that are probably pretty unique to PWS. There are some metabolic disturbances, high levels of ghrelin that are really only seen in PWS. And that progression from, not being interested in food to having this excessive appetite is really probably fairly specific to PWS. We also have a lot of behavioral features, so temper outbursts, OCD behaviors, anxiety, and of course, those are not unique to PWS, but they have some unique features in PWS. So I think there's lessons to be learned in kind of doing that compare and contrast. How is anxiety in PWS the same or different than anxiety in other neurodevelopmental disorders, for example? So we have the global PWS registry on the I Am Rare platform. We were one of the first registries that launched on the platform in 2015, and we've been very active in our registry. We have about 2,000 participants enrolled, most of those in the United States, but it is an international registry, so many countries involved. And we've got a lot of surveys, and there's a downside to asking people for so much information, but I think on balance, it's been really beneficial to be asking about many aspects of PWS. So we ask about medical and developmental history, medications, and behaviors. The goals of our registry are probably pretty similar to any of the registries on there. We want to develop a better understanding of the scope of challenges in PWS. We want to support clinical trials by being able to pair people up with clinical trials that they may be eligible for. We want to find what are the areas of unmet need and where do we need to be putting our research dollars, and ultimately to improve the lives of individuals with PWS. But as we've progressed and our registry has grown, we've really started to use it to really actively support therapeutic development. So we have this, pretty comprehensive medical history, medication history, so that when pharmaceutical companies come to us and, for example, ask, like, okay, so how many people are taking this drug because that would make them ineligible for our trial, we can pull that information really quickly and help pharmaceutical companies understand our population. We also have a prospective natural history study that's a sub-study within the registry, and that is tracking how many serious medical events and the types of serious medical events that are occurring in our kids with PWS. That's also really important for therapeutic development, to see kind of what the baseline of side effects is, so that we can better understand if a drug is actually increasing a particular side effect or complication of PWS. In addition, we've partnered with industry partners to help validate new clinical endpoints using the registry. That's been a great use of the registry, so we can really quickly, get a couple of hundred people to test out a survey and see if it is, making sense, if there's validity, test and retest. So that's been great. And also for documenting unmet medical need, which is really important information to be bringing to the FDA so that they can understand, the needs in our community, the tolerance for risk, and also that pharmaceutical companies can understand if their drug makes sense for our community. We've also been really busy trying to report back to the community through papers and also through infographics that we share, just so that our people who are participating and contributing their data might be able to see how that data is being used. We have a governance structure, an advisory board that consists of two PWS experts from academic institutions, 2 parent advocates, 2 representatives of PWS advocacy groups, and 1 industry representative who is not involved in PWS pharmaceutical development. And that group sets policy for the registry use. They approve all of our patient recruitment, our registry-based studies, and they ensure their ultimate goal is to ensure that the data collected is used in accordance with our protocol and to the benefit of our community. So we were very interested, of course, in the rare disease RDCA-DAP, and wanted to learn more about how we might be able to use that to learn more about PWS. And so we've learned we were attracted by the fact that there might be some more advanced analytics that we could use to do our data analysis. So Jessica Bohanowicz on our research staff does a great job of looking at the data, but some of the analytics that we'd like to do, like comparing how 2 surveys interact with each other, how one feature of PWS might be impacting another feature of PWS, is really kind of beyond our data analytics capability. And so we look to we saw potential in the DAP program. And we also thought it would be an opportunity to leverage our data set with other data sources and maybe better understand PWS and better understand how PWS is similar and different from other rare disorders and neurodevelopmental disorders. So it was very attractive, but on the other hand, we had a lot of questions. So, and particularly our governance, our governing body had these questions as well. They wanted to understand, is the data, we collected the data, people are trusting us to take care of their data. And so if we share the data, is that going to be in accordance with, our protocol and how we told people we were going to use the data? They wanted to make sure that we had mechanisms in place to ensure that no identifying information was shared. They also were cognizant, we're a small nonprofit like so many of us, and how much time was this going to take up, and what priority did it have compared to other programs? And can we retain control over who is accessing the data? So, we've put a lot of time and effort into gathering this data. And one of the advantages of having it is it allows us to communicate with pharmaceutical companies, for example, who might be interested, or researchers who are new to the field. And then we have an opportunity to discuss with them, the needs of the community. And then finally, the ultimate question, of course, is, will access to the data benefit members of our community? And so we went through that. We've had discussions with the folks at NORD, as well as at the Critical Path Institute, about how the data would be used, what level of control we as the patient organization would have about that. And I have to say, it was a very open and transparent process. There was a lot of great discussion, and we kind of went back and forth until everybody felt really comfortable that this would be A, good use of our data, and B, that the data would be protected, and C, that it would, ultimately benefit our community. So we're, really excited. Again, it's early days. We're just, have recently shared that data, but looking forward towards, how we might combine our data with others' data and use the platform to do a more detailed analysis and really get at some of the questions that our researchers are really interested in following up on. So I will thank you for your attention and turn it over to Mark.
Great. Thanks, Teresa. And I'd like to thank NORD for allowing me to share the International Pemphigus and Pemphigoid Foundation experience with the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator data and analytics platform. And Sue, I'm just going to take your cue and just call it DAP. I think that's the way to go. And really discuss, how it can accelerate drug development in your rare disease community. So pemphigus and pemphigoid are a set of rare autoimmune blistering skin diseases. And like all rare diseases, drug development has been a challenge for the IPPF because of our small patient populations. We also have a limited understanding of how these diseases can manifest and progress. And our disease generally affects people 60 or older. And because of this, collecting data can sometimes be very challenging. Misdiagnosis and delay in diagnosis is extremely common. And on average, patients see about 5 doctors in a 10-month period just to even receive a diagnosis. So due to average age of onset, therapy strategies are particularly tough because of comorbidities. So because of this, the IPPF is focusing on bringing together the experience of patients and their clinical data so we can create a deeper or a clearer path for accelerating new treatments. The goal is to have well-defined and meaningful outcomes that improve our understanding of the progression of pemphigus and pemphigoid. This would accelerate, or definitely will accelerate clinical development and encourage industry to develop new drugs in our space. So within our disease, and like many diseases, there's multiple knowledge gaps that exist, including a lack of nationwide or worldwide studies in assessing the disease characteristics and the clinical characteristics, such as the disease severity, not always being assessed by doctors, clinicians, and researchers. We're also trying to seek to understand the time and from developing when patients develop their first symptoms to receiving a diagnosis. Circumstances may cause delay in diagnosis, the prevalence of other autoimmune comorbidities, and the correlation between disease activity and limitations to patients' daily activities. When the IPPF held its first patient forum in October of 2020 to learn about patients' perspective, patients clearly stressed the impact that these diseases have on their daily lives and the need for access to improved therapies. The objective of the forum was to better understand the patient's perspective, identify their urgent needs, and assess the state of current treatments and discuss how to utilize and leverage the patient's data and for them to share their voices. At the conclusion of the forum, a consensus was reached on the most urgent needs facing the pemphigus and pemphigoid community. Improving the speed of accuracy in diagnosis was number 1. 2, develop improved treatments and options. And 3, improve the affordability of access of current and future therapies based on these needs. And they all agreed that three things really need to happen. We need to elevate awareness of pemphigus and pemphigoid and the patient journey and perspective among key audiences, including clinicians, researchers, thought leaders, government agencies, lawmakers, and many others. Increase awareness of ongoing clinical trials of promising investigational candidates to improve participation in trials with the goal of developing more effective and well-tolerated treatments for pemphigus and pemphigoid. And lastly, to improve affordability and access to all of these therapies. If we don't have access to them, it's not going to do anything. So one key advantage that the IPPF has, as Teresa mentioned, is the advantage of having a natural history study. This online data system collects and stores and retrieves patient data for analysis and research studies. The natural history study is designed to help the medical and research community understand illness trends, treatment outcomes, disease burden, and some very important demographic issue about patients. With the information from large numbers of patients, we can better advocate for resources to improve patient outcomes, provide support and doctor education, as well as accelerate research. And we are utilizing this data to accelerate exploration of new treatments, evaluate patient outcomes, and inform development of future clinical trials. Since the launch of our natural history study in 2017, the IPPF has implemented more open collaboration among stakeholders. We've seen an uptick in more investigator-initiated studies and an increase of peer-reviewed journal publications being published, opportunities for poster presentations, the development of a white paper, industry requests for patient focus groups and advisory panels, and definitely an increase in scientific cooperation for our disease space, and a FDA listening session. So this is exciting. Also to be involved in DAP. It houses patient data from multiple sources, including clinical trials, longitudinal observational studies, patient registries, and real-world data. The platform is advancing the cooperation research approach to accelerated treatments. It provides an infrastructure and creates clinical trial readiness. The centralized data that supports disease characterization that is creating clinical outcome assessment measures and expanding our current clinical trials network to accelerate treatments and potentially a cure. So thank you again for allowing me to share my experience with DAP and our natural history study. And if you'd like to contact me directly about the natural history study or about DAP, you can contact me at mark@pemphigus.org.
Thank you so much, Teresa and Mark. And thank you for giving such a great overview of your registry studies and how you've been able to use and leverage your registries to date. So I actually wanted to start off by asking Mark, what was the main considerations for joining the DAP program? I know that Teresa kind of went through the top questions on her list, and so I was just wondering, to mirror her presentation, what were the main concerns and considerations from the IPPF, and then what ultimately led you into joining DAP?
Yeah, I think security obviously is always a main concern and focus of our patient community. So, having the natural history study and having the ability to de-identify the data, I think is key. But honestly, our organization and our community is very excited about being involved in research. So there really we didn't have any second thoughts about joining. We were like, this potentially could lead to all of the things that I mentioned: accelerated treatments, better outcomes for patients. So we really didn't have there weren't a lot of downfalls, but I think, security, making sure that the infrastructure and the that it was organized properly, I think were really the biggest concerns that we had.
Great. Thank you so much. Teresa, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Mark's, hit on it. I mean, again, for our advisory board, they just wanted to feel really comfortable that all the data was going to be taken care of, that it was going to be de-identified properly, and nor did that. And then we were allowed to do the quality check on it. So, we stayed involved with the whole process, which I think, Critical Path Institute and NORD are both highly respected organizations, so that helped too. But it's nice to be able to be involved in the process, and then you feel like you get kind of protective of the data, right? People have spent a lot of time entering this data, and they're trusting you to take care of it and use it well. And to Mark's point, I think we need to use it well. We've collected this data. We need to be using it in ways that can help accelerate therapeutics. And this is, a really promising way to move things forward.
That's great. Thank you so much. And you actually answered my question because you mentioned level of control, the level of control that you were allowed to have in this partnership. And your explanation here just totally answered that question. So thank you for adding to Mark's response. So I do want to talk a little bit about how your organization further foresees leveraging this information that is currently being put into DAP. And have you been having any conversations overall with other organizations to build collaborations? And this is to both of you. I know Mark said a little bit about added collaborations. So maybe I'll pitch it to you first, Mark, and then Teresa can answer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. Yeah, I know we've had a lot of interest, obviously, particularly from industry, to really help them understand the patient journey, and this data collection has really helped us get a much better understanding of the patient journey. So we've had stakeholders ask for us to share some of the data, and we've entered into some agreements with them to share some of the data. They've asked us to, by having the data that we've been collecting, we've been able to kind of leverage that data to kind of help us make inroads with industry and inroads with stakeholders. So as I mentioned, they're coming to us, asking us to create patient advisory councils or patient focus groups, or even doing some market research to even understand, what that patient perspective is. So that's certainly been very helpful. And then, of course, with researchers, a lot of collaboration, I think, has been born from the fact that we are, again, collecting this data. The foundation is really a conduit between researchers and having access to a large number of individuals with these diseases. A lot of these researchers or clinicians may have a small group of patients that they see, but it's not enough to really do enough research on. So we have really that ability to create that bridge between the data and the research that needs to get done.
So I can add to that. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential collaborations that we see coming out of this. I mean, one way would be, for example, we have an increased risk of seizures in PWS, and we don't understand why. And there are so many other neurodevelopmental disorders that have an increased risk of seizures. So it's not, I guess if you're a family that is having seizures, it is a major concern, but it's only about 20% of our population, right? So learning from combining data and trying to learn from other neurodevelopmental disorders about, the causes, the best treatment, that kind of thing, I think it just gives us a whole new way of trying to understand, one important aspect of PWS, but not sort of the main thing that hits 100% of our kids. So that's one thing, is kind of expanding, like on a symptom specific level, our understanding of some of these symptoms. And the other is, as Mark mentions, the connection with industry and the information from clinical trials, which is very different than what we collect in our registry. So all of our registry is patient reported, and there's some, fantastic information about patient experience and retrospective histories and things. But, in clinical trials, you're getting lab data and this kind of thing. So the possibility of being able to combine our, patient experience data with, potentially data that comes from clinical trials, I think would be really, really powerful for our community.
Another beneficial collaboration as well has been with just other patient organizations. So working with the other patient organizations that are involved with the IMRARE platform, and learning from them, learning, what their successes are, and what potential opportunities are, have been very very helpful for us as we're continuing to collect more data and develop more tools and more resources to be able to provide to researchers.
Thank you so much. And I think our community is also saying thank you to the both of you, because there are those who are new to the community and they're just getting their feet wet with DAP. And so hearing your perspective is really helpful for them, and those who may not have fully understood what's going on. Hearing two active participants may help them to ask some additional questions and then make a decision one way or the other. And so that leads me into, I know you've talked a little bit about the data that you collect in your studies, your registries, but I was wondering if you get to decide which data you contribute to DAP and what you've contributed so far in terms of data from your surveys.
Yeah, as I mentioned, for us anyway, we have a lot of surveys. And so, we were kind of selective initially. So what we've contributed to DAP are some of the general medical, again, getting at maybe some of these symptoms that are shared across diseases, thinking about that. So that's one thing. And another thing is our behavioral data, so that we can look at changes over time. I think that's, again, challenging for us to do on, with our current level of data analysis. And so we're looking forward to the capabilities of the DAP to help us understand, some of these more complex behaviors in PWS and how they change over time, and how one behavior is potentially related to another behavior. So that's what we've shared to date.
Yeah, and for us, we've been a little bit more conservative in our surveys. We don't want to cause too much survey fatigue, but particularly with our population. But so we've been kind of systematically launching surveys year over year, just to kind of continue to gather additional information, whether it be on delays in diagnosis or treatment therapies that are working. And so, I think the nice thing about DAP, or the beauty of DAP, of course, is that we can contribute what we choose to contribute. So, we have the ability to, as Teresa mentioned, kind of analyze the data in advance before we decide to do that. So, if there's something we maybe need to learn a little bit more about, I think it gives us the opportunity to be able to do that.
Great, thank you. And so, Teresa, you mentioned in your answer previously the current analytics that you do within the organization. And so I'm just wondering, how do you currently handle analytics? And that's to both you and Mark.
I asked Jessica to do it. So we have someone on our research staff, Jessica Bahanowicz, who has gotten pretty good at doing pivot tables and doing. So we do a lot of it in house. But again, she's very sharp. But she's not a bioinformatician by training. And I think one of the attractive things at the DAP is, the ability to have a more powerful analytic platform, aside from, Jessica and her Excel tables, which has been great, again. But, when we're looking at more complex questions, it's hard to do those analyses if you're not specifically trained in it, and if you don't have the analytical platform capability. So that's where we're looking forward to getting beyond the, the kind of, they're not too basic questions that we have, but, the basics that we're able to readily do in-house.
Yeah, so I would say similarly to Teresa, and I'm not an analytics expert either. And because, we're a small patient organization with limited resources, we don't really have the ability to go outside and find somebody that can analyze the data and be able to use that translationally to understand more about the disease. So all of our analytics have been done mostly in-house. Certainly we utilize our medical advisory council to kind of help us look at some of that. And like Teresa, we've developed a core group of people that help us kind of look at those things. But as she stated, that's the huge advantage of DAP is now we can take this data, put it into, provide it into a platform where there are experts that can analyze the data who can really help us come up with impactful outcomes. And so, that's the benefit, the huge benefit of utilizing DAP is, we've got experts to help us take this information and really help us decide how we're going to utilize it to best serve our patient communities.
Great, thank you so much. And so that leads me into asking about whether you've communicated with the patient community about this additional use of data, because something that we've heard time and time again, or when there's hesitation from the patient community to participate in research, is we never know how the data is being used, or we don't see the outcome, or is it stuck somewhere? And so knowing that there are all of these avenues for research and analysis and collaboration, what's the messaging that you're putting out to your patient communities?
So that's a great question, which makes me realize that, we've communicated with our advisory board about that. And we do prioritize trying to, get information back out to our community. As I mentioned, we do, every other month we have an infographic on GI problems or sleep issues or anxiety, whatever. But we're sort of early in the game with the DAP, and so we have not messaged out to the community how that data is going to be used, in part because I think, for our own information, we're just at that earliest stage of understanding what the analytics platform can do for our data. So definitely something we need to communicate out to our organization or our families. Yes.
And we've expressed once we joined DAP, we sent out a communication and let our community know about it. And we did get some feedback, stating that they're excited that we're working with some larger groups, Critical Path as well as NORD, to really try to help understand and utilize the data better. But like Teresa, I think, you can never communicate enough with your community to say, hey, this is what's happening with your data. This is how it's going to be used. These are the potential benefits from us utilizing DAP and analyzing this information. And again, just goes back to those outcomes that we talked about. Helping develop new clinical trials, better patient outcomes. Really trying to accelerate and excite the research community so that they get excited about what's happening. And so we could do more, absolutely, and plan on doing so.
That's wonderful. So I do want to lean a little bit more into NORD, the patient advocacy organizations, and DAP. And so are there any specific benefits that you've experienced from being in DAP so far, and with regards to standardizing your surveys or improving your data collection processes?
Well, I mean, when we contributed data, they gave us a report on our data and the data quality, which nobody had ever done before. So that was very helpful, just to have sort of outside eyes on it and, understand kind of from the perspective of people who kind of do this, all the time as they're living, what are areas that look good and what are areas that need improvement. So that was helpful to us.
Yeah, same here. And I think, as Teresa stated, I mean, you've got people that, are experts in looking at this data, collaborating together. So it is like a collaborative effort to try to look at the data and understand it. So having that fresh pair of eyes, like she mentioned, being able to look at the data has certainly been beneficial, I think, for us, particularly as we go forward and as we develop new surveys. So our plan is to develop actually 2 new surveys this year to really help better understand some specific efficacies of therapies, but also the burden of systemic corticosteroids on our patients, because that has a huge impact on their daily lives. So by being able to get the feedback from DAP to understand what data is necessary, what data they're looking for, has been helpful as we develop the surveys, so that we have to know what needs to be collected from all of the perspectives, what's important to researchers, what industry might be interested in learning. So all of those things are really important to understand along with the patient perspective. And I think DAP really helps kind of, again, bring all of that together under one roof.
And I think, both you and I, Mark, I mean, we're not experts in this. So just having someone who, I have a scientific background, but it's not in this, and this is a very complicated thing. So having experts there who understand this and who understand how best to use the data and being able to have a conversation with them about what data collection should look like going forward is a great help.
That's excellent. Thank you. So one of the things I was thinking about is like population size, data set size. I know that FPWR's registry is pretty large and pretty robust. And at the last check, Mark, I think as of May of this year, the end of May of this year, your registry had about 512 individuals who had created accounts. And since the launch of your study, the registry study, there have been over 1,500 survey submissions. And so my question to you all is, were there any considerations or was there any hesitation about like the data set, the amount of data you were contributing, and whether you thought it was enough data to be a part of DAP?
Yeah, I think for us, obviously you have to start somewhere. And, we certainly, we don't have 2,000 individuals like PWS, but, we feel pretty happy about the 500 that we have, that are, over 500 that are participating now. Certainly I think you have to, one of our concerns was to make sure that we didn't create survey fatigue, and that the individuals that were involved in the surveys felt like it was manageable, for them to do. These are people that have a rare disease and they have to manage that on a regular basis. We don't want to put too much burden on them when it comes to surveys. So I think that was a concern for us out of the gate, but I think we've been continuing to add more and more surveys as we go, to try to help continue to grow that bank of data that we can put into DAP, and that will help us, I think, longitudinally in the long run, be able to really understand that patient journey and that patient experience much better.
And I would just add, we do have a pretty big database in PWS, but it's not like it got there. It's taken us quite some time to get there, right? And so, the number of people and the surveys has changed over time. As we added a survey when COVID came around, so we could understand how the lockdown was impacting our kids' ability to, for schooling and education. So one of the great things about the IAMRARE platform is the flexibility and the fact that we can add surveys that are relevant to our community as they're needed. So I think looking forward, continuing to have that flexibility and being able to collaborate with the DAP, group is really critical, because things have changed over the last, in the 6 years since we've launched, and our needs are different, and our ability to develop new surveys that serve the needs of the moment are really important.
Yeah, Teresa makes a really good point. I mean, the flexibility is crucial, and the environment changes, right, in lots of different ways. So there may be therapies that become approved by the FDA, and that might just change the entire landscape, right? We had a therapy that was approved back in 2019 that really was a game changer for us. So that changed how we started to think about things. So the environment's always changing, and so having that flexibility is definitely a plus.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think there's one other point I would add to both of your perspectives, and it's that while there are similarities, or there may be similarities across rare conditions, no two are identical. And so it is kind of unfair. And it was an intentional question, because I want our community members to know that the community size will differ, right? People are affected at different rates. And so while PWS might have a much larger community, the pemphigus and pemphigoid community might not have as many individuals who are affected. And so you really have to gauge your registry, your study population, the data within your registry through a separate set of lens, because you can't, it's definitely not apples to apples in this situation. So thank you for indulging me in my trick question.
Well, I would say, just to build on that too, I would say that data is data, right? So no matter the size of your organization, data is king, right? The more data you have, the better you can utilize it to understand the people that have the disease, and you can utilize it to leverage research. It doesn't have to be large research. It can be small research. So, but data is king. So just, the goal is just collect the data.
That is wonderful. And I know that we're just about out of time, but I do want to squeeze one more question in there. And this is really one speaking to or registry community members who are just learning about DAP, who are just getting their feet wet in the research space and with registries. And so in one sentence, and this might be pressure, but in one sentence, what would you say to our community members who are thinking through this process, hearing about DAP for the first time, and really have heard this great information from you both today? What would you say to them who are considering engaging with DAP?
I think I would say, I can do it in two words, just get started, right? I mean, it may be overwhelming because it's a complicated platform, but if you get started, if you have some interesting data already, or if you can, develop a survey and bring in, even a small, focused bit of data that you think might benefit from being shared across disorders, for example, go ahead and get started. And that's the way you learn. You learn about the platform, you learn about what can and can't be done. And you build it as you go.
I would say that one sentence, huh? I would say that, I guess goes back to what I was saying before. I mean, collecting patient reported data is really the key to helping unlock the mysteries of the disease and accelerating research and potentially cures. That's a long sentence, but there you go.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually I think that's a really nice way to end, because one of the questions that I had but didn't get to today was, what this means as a data input source to have the patient voice be a part of active research. We know that the FDA has really been making an effort to include the patient voice, whether it is at the development stage of research in clinical trials and looking at that data. And so this really is proof, essentially, another way to prove that your voice matters and that you can be an active research contributor from the patient community, and then also with the patient advocacy organizations shepherding this data and protecting it on behalf of patients. So I think that really is a great way, and excellent job that our patient advocacy groups are doing with regards to helping to push research forward and advocating for the patient voice in the research space. And so with that, I thank you both so much for a really engaging conversation and for sharing your experiences. It's really helpful to hear what your experiences are, what your considerations were, what your hesitation is or was. And I think all of this is really great hearing it, for at least for patient community who are looking to join DAP. It's great to hear your experience, because it's one thing to hear it from us, it's another to hear it from the Critical Path Institute, but you're active contributors. So thank you again so much. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us today. Any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. Research-programs@rarediseases.org. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.